Enjoy with your headphones for a better listening experience.
Please watch till the end of the video to have the most scariest part of the story.
What is a horrifying experience you have lived? 193. Aside from being harassed by random men, even having a guy literally try to lure me into a dark alley, the worst thing was once when I was 18 my then BF and I had gone to the aquarium for a day. There's a large footbridge that has public bathrooms built into the base. I had to go to the bathroom, so I went inside. It was large and mostly dark, and empty aside from me. I'm in the stall, and I hear the door to the room open. Sometime walk in. I saw a pair of men's shoes cross in front of my stall door, then kept going through the rest of the bathroom. It was divided into two sections by a wall. I was in the front section. I assumed the man went to the back section of the bathroom to make sure no one else was in there. As soon as I saw his shoes, I was terrified because judging by how soon I'd heard the door, he must have followed me inside. When I thought he was as far away as he could be, I unlocked the stall and ran out of the bathroom. Didn't flush or give any hint I was about to leave, just ran. I left the bathroom and ran up to my BF who was waiting for me. I didn't have a chance to tell him what happened before the door behind me burst open. This guy looked like a classic predator. He even had glasses and a mustache. He stopped as soon as he saw me standing with my boyfriend, then turned and quickly walked away. My BF and I left immediately. It was terrifying and is the closest call I've had. I actually repressed the memory for a while. 194. I used to pick up hours working in the hospital that would either mean really early mornings or extremely late nights. I started taking the bus after my car died. I had moved and the closest stop to me was a block away from a rough part of town. One night, I got off the bus at 1 a.m. It was the last stop. As I'm walking, I hear footsteps behind me. Very odd being so late on a weekday. I altered my pace and turned a block toward the busier street, taking a very zigzag route. Those steps were still behind me and mirrored my changes. Finally, they dropped far enough back that I bolted down a tiny alley and swung around the side of a house and hid on the other side right back by the main road. I heard footsteps run past and hesitate before going the opposite direction of where I was. Then I bolted and backtracked and got to my house through the neighbor's backyard. I don't think I slept that night, and even 12 years later, it still creeps me out to walk at night. 195. Some time ago my grandmother lived with before passing away. She had slept in the spare room next to mine. We didn't get along at all. I still remember shooting begun pellets at her as a child, but when she pasted away I slept in her room. I don't know why, just because I was sorry I wasn't nicer to Het. Then I fell asleep and got woken up by hearing women talking. But when I wanted to turn around and look if my TV was on, I was completely paralyzed. I couldn't move a muscle. Then I saw in the window's reflection a black figure coming into the room, and I still couldn't move. Then the black figure jumped into me, as I suddenly shock awake, able to move again with a sharp pain in my back. And this dream kept happening over and over, and the pain got so bad, until I changed rooms, back to my old one. I still sleep with lights on, and I'm 15. 196. I'd say this was creepy. I was about 5-6 years old. I'm a girl. I was new at school. This was early in my first year. Now, my school, the two classes for kids my age in their own separate building from the rest. All the other years were in a big building nearby. So, I left my class to go to the toilet. My year had our own toilets in our building. On my way I saw this older girl, probably 10 years old, hanging about in the corridor. She was sneaking around like she knew she wasn't supposed to be there. She kept ducking in and out of sight of some adults who were sitting in the corridor talking and writing something. She should have been in class at the top of the main building. I don't know how or why she was in our building just hanging about. Even at that age I got the sense something was off. I went into the toilets, and I could tell she followed me in even though I couldn't see her. You can sense someone's presence. I used the loo, and I waited and waited for her to leave. She didn't. So, I opened the door, stepped out, and she was standing blocking the aisle. Arms on either side, legs spread apart. I just knew something really bad was about to happen. I don't know what she wanted to do, but she had this creepy grin on her face. I mean the look of a predator, I can't describe it any other way. But my brain was like danger. You're in danger. She wants to harm you. I politely tried to get past her, then I physically tried to push past her, but I couldn't. I was a tiny kid, she was at least twice my size. Then she started walking towards me, blocking me when I tried to get past her. I couldn't get past her, and she kept blocking my path and backing me further and further into the room. I was absolutely terrified. I was a very shy kid, but I remembered the adults sitting in the corridor doing paperwork when I came in. I started calling for help. But I was small and very shy, I was an incredibly quiet kid. At first I barely made a noise. But I kept trying to get my voice louder and louder. And the girl started moving faster and faster towards me, taking me further and further into the room. Thankfully 2 adults ran in, and one grabbed the girl, knew her name, wasn't their kid though, and dragged her out. I've had worse, but this is something I remember really vividly. It's my earliest memory. I haven't thought about it in a long time, but it might explain why I always felt so unsafe and trapped in school buildings. And why I had nightmares about being trapped in that building well into my teens. 197. A friend of mine and I took a trip from Philly to Centralia for the crazy mine fires that burn to this day. Like any early 20s, kids we looked around took pictures, thought it was a cool place with some crazy history. On our way out, we missed an exit or something and ended up taking a back road to get to the highway. On this 2-lane road was a luggage bag wide open with clothes sticking out. I slowed down my old 90 Toyota Camry, this was early 2000 son it was already older, lol, and my friend goes, this don't feel right, just keep driving. So, I drove around it on the opposite side and kept going. Maybe not 100 feet behind us, a group of maybe 20 to 30 what I can only describe as Amish-looking people pop out of the ditches that I didn't pay attention to and stare at my car as we drove off. My heart was in my throat, my hands went instantly clammy and sweaty, and all I could say was oh, and we finally made it back to the highway to go home. That was the creepiest experience of my life. 198. I think when I was at a pizza place with my little brother. He was eating cheese, and he suddenly began choking on some cheese, and my mom was trying to take the cheese out, and she couldn't get it out. I began to panic, and almost thought I would lose my little brother. But a man came over to my little brother, and began punching my brother in the back. And after some punches in the back, he then threw out the cheese that had been stuck in his throat. Ever since that happened, I have always been careful eating cheese. 199. I dated a guy who stalked me when I was 16/17. When I finished things, he would not let go. He followed me around town, to and from school, he was 21, and would circle my work when I was there. That's not even that bad part. He had an older 28-year-old friend. I met him exactly once. And all I remember is he drove a white pickup. Well, the ex never went anywhere without his car. It was like his kid. Well, one day out of nowhere, I get a text from this other friend, I'd blocked the ex on everything, saying, he just wants to give you your stuff back. He told me where the ex wanted to meet and when. It was a public place, during daylight hours. I was like, alright cool, glad to be done with this. I get there, and the ex's car is nowhere to be seen. No cars anywhere in the parking lot except for one, a white pickup with a guy watching me from inside eating chips. The ex was on a bench inside a gazebo on the property. No stuff of mine was anywhere in sight. I called from inside my vehicle and asked where my stuff was and where his car was. Oh, it was such a nice day, I figured I'd park away and walk over here. No way. Didn't even mention my stuff. I told him I wasn't going out, and he went literally nuts. Screaming and yelling and calling me things. I sped away. I told my dad in tears like 2 days later. It was only then that I processed that I was probably going to be kidnapped and killed if I'd gotten out of that car. I knew it, somewhere deep down at the time. But only a couple of days later did my brain put my instincts into words. 200. I got a few here. 1. When I was really little, apparently I broke away from my mom and ran in front of a huge oncoming truck. I don't remember it though. 2. When I was 6 or 7, I almost drowned while swimming at a lake with family friends. And 3. It not as serious, but it was recent and the scariest for me. About 2 weeks ago, I got really dehydrated. I wasn't eating or drinking for almost 2 days straight, and while I was fixing myself a drink, I blacked out and walked to the center of the kitchen, before fainting and face-planting, hitting my head full force on the counter, and on the floor, I had the wind knocked out of me and couldn't breathe for about half a minute. Low-key thought I was going to die, and the first thing that went through my mind was how big of a mess there would be when the cats eat my corpse. I'm okay now though, so here's a reminder to drink some water today. 201. I was driving home at 3 in the morning, sleep deprived, and driving on an interstate. I don't know exactly what happened, but I'm fairly confident I blacked out, going 70 plus mph, for roughly 10-ish seconds, because of where I was compared to where I woke up at, and when I came to I was somehow still on the road. It wasn't until a few moments later that I realized what had happened, and I could have easily run off the road and been killed. 202. I watched my mom die. She had cancer. On her last day, she rasped, "I love you," to me, and those were the last words she ever spoke. Her eyes rolled into the back of her head. She kept reaching her arms up towards the ceiling, as if someone were trying to lift her up. She made choking, rattling noises. Her tongue bulged out of her mouth. She died at 3:16 that morning. We called the funeral home, who took 14 hours to get there while the family kept vigil by her body in the hospital bed in the living room. Rigor mortis had set in, and when the huge guys from the funeral home arrived, they had to snap her body to get it into the body bag. It's been 4 years, and I still have nightmares about it. 203. I grew up in an abusive house and me and my sister were tormented daily. We both had a dreadful day at school and our stepdad was mad at us for no reason. As usual, I did everything he said to avoid being beaten, but unfortunately I made a minor mistake. This mistake was dropping a plate and it chipped. This is where it gets bad. My sister and I were sent to our rooms. We were called out 10 minutes later and there was a chair in the middle of the living room. On this chair was a mixture of assorted items. He asked us to pick one, and without question we did. He then proceeded to beat us with the items we chose, and then sent us to our rooms. I picked the one I thought would hurt the least, and told my sister. I guess he heard me. I was called back out, and he picked one and beat me with it again, but it was worse this time. It's something I'll never forget. 204. When I was 6 years old, my mom taught me what to do when someone told me to come with them, that I should never accept any offers from strangers, to scream fire instead of help and all that stuff. Sometime after that I was walking home from school. I was walking alone because my school was pretty close, and my parents were working. When I was nearly at home, a girl or woman from the other side of the street asked me where I am going. I told her I wasn't supposed to tell her that, so she asked me if I wanted to get some ice cream. I told her no, my mom would be waiting for me at home and I am not supposed to talk to strangers. She then insisted that I should come with her, and we would call my mother. At this point I was beyond scared cause my mom just told me about kidnappers, and here I was in the exact situation. The girl or woman said she knows my mom and she is sure that my mom would be okay with me getting some ice cream. I told her she had to leave me alone and that I knew who lived in the house I was standing in front of, and I would go inside now. I ran up the stairs and knocked while the girl was still watching and knocking. I don't know what happened after that, but I guess the resident brought me home or called my mom. Also, when I was 2 or 3 years old, I nearly drowned. I was playing at the pool and fell in. There were no adults nearby, only our dog Lucy, an American Staffordshire. She started barking like crazy, and a friend of my parents, the owner of the house with the pool, came by to check why the dog was barking. When he saw me in the pool, he jumped inside without hesitation and pulled me out. My mother's best friend's daughter, I know, always tells me that story, 'cause it's her grandpa that saved me. 2:05, I was in Chicago for work on the 4th of July, 2019, and decided to go down to Navy Pier to see the fireworks, never having been to a major city for the 4th before. It was packed, but the fireworks were amazing, and I was glad I went. On my way out, the crowd suddenly stops and then scatters as everyone ducks for cover. I can see police running around through the small field of view I have. After a minute, everyone gets up and runs, me included. A couple people said something about an active shooter. I called my mom to say there was a mass shooting, but I survived uninjured. I'd later find out there was no mass shooting. Someone mistook fireworks for gunshots and set off a large-scale panic. They mistook fireworks for gunshots. On the 4th of July. After going to see fireworks. Seems so dumb now, but I was mortified that my life was about to come to a tragic end for a few minutes there. 2:06, a few months ago, I was staying at my mother's apartment because of the pandemic. We were sitting in the living room watching a movie when we suddenly heard some shots. They were so loud, we immediately dropped to the floor. Silence followed, and we were looking at each other in fear. We hear police sirens after a while. It turns out someone shot her neighbor in the parking lot and that her apartment looked over. A drug deal gone wrong. There was so much blood pooling around him. It was quite a horrifying experience. The guy passed away. They thankfully caught the killer the next day. 2:07, I left my husband and went to a domestic violence shelter. All was going well until he found me. When I left, he went into rehab, trying to blame our wonderful DR for this addiction. I was gone about 3 months when he contacted me that he was filing for bankruptcy, and I needed to come back, where I was going to be responsible for all his debts. I went back. He promised things would be better. Within a month, I was feeling things were not good, and he didn't change. For 6 weeks, he told me if I went to sleep, he was going to cut my heart out. He had weapons in the house, was a big hunter, and I knew he could do it if he wanted. I started bleeding, as if on my menstrual period, but it wouldn't stop. I bled every day for over 6 weeks and only weighed 90 pounds. I finally contacted my family up north, and my sister met me at a car wash. I put my stuff along with my kids' belongings in the car, left the keys in my car, and headed north. No one knew where I was doing, and he would call my family's house, and they all told him they hadn't seen me. Karma caught up with him, and now he's retarded, because some Florida boys bashed his ass and almost killed him. I wish I knew who it did, so I could thank them. 2:08, on Halloween when I was maybe 20, I was driving from my hometown to Tallahassee, Florida to a party. Our usual group of 3 ended up waiting for a 4th friend to get off of work at Spirit Halloween, and we were just gonna arrive late. On the way out, the friend driving goes, "You ever get that feeling that something really bad is gonna happen?" And we all laughed it off and tried to not be worried by it. About halfway there, we noticed this semi-truck behind us driving up on us really fast, like easily 20 miles per hour over the speed limit. I'm not sure if we cut him off at some point unwittingly, but he went around us and cut us off hard. We slowed down, we sped past him. He keeps up with us, overtaking us, and slowing down again. At one point, he turns his lights off while speeding up to us. At another, he weaves between the lanes to keep us from passing. We call the police officers, they tell us not to exit. We're screaming as this continues while we're on the phone. I told my friend to get off at this next exit. He doesn't listen, which I'm glad for, because the truck took the exit instead. The police officers had a description and the exit, so we got off the phone. After a few minutes of yelling and talking, there's eventually a sigh of calm over the car. And literally as soon as that happened, a bird hit the window, leaving wing dust prints. The screaming began again. We pulled over and got some drinks and smoked a cigarette before we continued. Then when we got to the party, the whole house ended up accidentally taking meth in place of Molly, and it got really weird. I swear it's all true. 2:09, When I was 8, I was playing in the backyard with my dog, a Cocker Spaniel, that was on a leash. When I noticed my dog barking differently and looking down the alley, I noticed a huge English Mastiff running toward me. I began running to the house, and I remember him biting the back of my shoe, and then I jumped. Not exactly sure how I made it to the steps, because they were about 20 yards away, and I just remember running up the steps going into the house to yell for help. I went back outside, and the Mastiff had my dog throwing him in the air. To this day, about 20 years later, I feel remorse that I didn't do more to help my dog. 2:10. When I was around 10, I was walking with my family through downtown Seattle after it was dark. We were getting dinner, some guys came up to us, and Kat called up my mom, which made me pretty nervous. Then they started following us as we kept walking, so my dad started to hold us a little closer. I turned around to look at them, and they had knives in their hands. At this point, we ran to another group of people and called the police. The guys had run away and never got caught to my knowledge. I'm simply scared to think what they might have done to us. 2:11. This is early 90s and no cell phones. I was a house/pet sitter in college. Usually, large homes and rather wealthy folks. Came back from class to a 4-bedroom house in a rural neighborhood. I enter through the kitchen. Noticed after I was in, that one of the panes of glass was missing in the French door, when the wind blew the curtain. The dog was going crazy and wanted out of the house. Hair stood up on the back of my neck. I immediately called an emergency number for relatives of the owners to mention the window. Did the owners know the window in the door was broken? The relative said, call the police. So now I am freaking out a bit and hang up and dial 911. The operator comes on and asks if anyone is in the house. I said I don't know. She tells me to wait by the street for the police. I hung up the phone and decided to call the relative again and cannot get a dial tone. I try again, it sounds like another phone is off the hook somewhere else in the house. I totally freak and get outside and join the dog. Maybe 15 minutes go by and then the police arrive. They searched the house and found all the doors upstairs closed and in one room a phone off the hook. All of the bedroom doors were closed when I had left the house earlier. So, someone was not only in the house with me but hiding and listening to me make calls. Then the police, and I noticed the neighbor's house about 100 meters away. There is nobody home, but the front door is wide open. So apparently I walked in on multiple burglaries. Glad I was not murdered. 2:12. A couple of years ago when I was still a teenager, my mom had married someone less savory, and they had 3 children of their own. Of course, they weren't kids, but most of them acted like they were. I wasn't allowed to talk about it when it happened due to legal reasons as there was a case, but now it's basically closed, but it's still horrifying. 2 out of the 3 were in a branch of the military and before they were sent to be stationed in another country. My last experience with one was being in their car with their to go and get snacks before heading home. He seemed so normal at the time. After they left to be stationed, the country where he was stationed lured him by catfish and arrested him for a good while before any of this was relayed back to my home. At first, we were all upset because no one told us what was going on then. He basically had a bunch of CP on his comp and possibly set up a thing where other perverts could harm young girls/children at his home, possibly involving his stepdaughter. The victims were younger than 5. There was a lot of evidence. From what I was told, he's going to be there for a long time. I can't remember if he was brought back to the States, because the place he was at is really strict with this sort of crime. As they should be. It still horrifies me that I was in the same car as someone so vile. I mean, he didn't fall from the proverbial tree that he came from. I also feel very guilty. I know it wasn't my responsibility, nor could I have known, but I wish I could have protected his ex-stepdaughter as she was so young and couldn't actually speak yet. I hope this doesn't have lasting effects as being assaulted by those young has done to me. Also, I'm not sharing. 2:13. I know someone will likely say this was a lucid dreaming experience, or my body trying to catch up to waking with my conscious mind, but still, I find the experience strange, and it's not that much of a story. One morning in my bed, I suddenly woke up, but could not move. I saw the morning light, bright, around 9 a.m. I would say, but I had no sensation. I did not even feel myself breathing. I could only think and nothing more, but then I began moving what I would describe as my head, as I looked around the room from right to left, and thought, what the hell? I suddenly felt my eyes open again, but I distinctly remember that feeling, a sensation of never opening my eyes first to begin with to ever reopening them a second time, as I re-woke up again. I was awake now, and the room was the same morning hour of light illuminated that I had just seen, so I know I didn't imagine it. It lasted only a few seconds, but I won't forget it. Edit, forgot to mention, when I was looking right to left, as I was looking leftward, I woke up again, and my actual head was in a straight position looking upwards, not in the left position, and I felt my eyelids open, but never a sensation of them ever closing to reopen them again in that moment. That's why I never forgot this experience. 214. This might not be too horrifying or creepy, but back in October 2017, I came back home from a long day at school, and all I wanted to do was just kick back and relax and play some video games or just watch some TV in the living room. I ended up chilling with my siblings and my stepdad in the living room while watching TV. A few minutes later, my stepdad out of nowhere said there's gonna be a tornado. I brushed it off as he was simply joking around, since he's got that sense of humor. But no, he wasn't joking, he was serious, because later on, I looked out the window and saw that the wind was blowing hard, like dread-filling hard. Moments later, my stepdad told me, and my siblings to go downstairs. I knew what was going on. A tornado was happening, a tornado. Me, my siblings, and my stepdad remained downstairs until the coast was clear. After a while, my stepdad was about to take us out to eat due to the power, obviously, being out, but saw that there was massive traffic, so he, of course, decided to take us back home and instead wait for my mom. When my mom came back from work, she made some chicken soup with some kind of campfire pot or whatever it was. Correct me if I'm wrong, since there wasn't really anything to eat. During the next few days, school was of course closed, and the power was out, and my stepdad would take us to Burger King to get a bite to eat, but from there I saw fallen trees. Some fell on the roofs of a couple of houses, a billboard that had the paper ripped out, and on the TV at BK, a news report showed numerous fallen trees. Differences with my stepdad aside, I commend him for being our guardian angel, by making sure that we were fed and safe. Eventually, the power came back on, and everything went back to normal, but that experience still chills me to the bone to this day. 215. This happened a couple of years ago. I was sitting in the toilet taking a dump. It was around 2 to 3 a.m. in the morning. This was in my house. I was a teenager back then. So, there I am taking a dump, and a few minutes in while I'm looking at the bathroom door I see something weird. It was an eyeball on the other side of the door, looking into the keyhole, straight at me. I thought it was just my siblings playing a prank on me, but everyone was asleep, so I called out expecting a response, but the eye stayed there staring at me. Then the door handle started to slowly turn. Good thing I locked the door, so no one could get in while I was dumping. Now I was scared. I was a kid sitting in a toilet in the dark hours of the morning while something was trying to get in. Then whatever was out there stopped turning the door handle, and the eyeball went away from the keyhole. Awesome, now I can go back to my bedroom, right? Wrong, I stayed in that toilet using chilly water to keep me awake till I could hear everyone in the house was awake. I didn't want to be part of the group of people that died mysterious deaths.
Thanks for watching. Please comment, like, share and subscribe. The Internet Surfer on YouTube for more horror and scary stories.